Thank you for joining For Our Special Kids, where we openly and honestly discuss the magic and the mess of raising a child with special needs. We are thrilled to have you here and hope this time provides you with some wonder and wisdom. I'm your host, Jennifer Lansing. Let's get started. I say in the introduction that we discuss the magic and the mess of raising a child with special needs. Well, today we are diving into some of that mess. Eli Harwood, otherwise known as the attachment nerd, has joined me today to talk about sexual trauma and sexual abuse. So, a quick disclaimer, you may feel uncomfortable at times. I certainly felt my anxiety rise a few moments in our conversation. We use the anatomically correct words in this segment, so if you have little ears listening with you, you may want to discuss body parts before hitting play. And we definitely dive into some very real examples that hopefully will shine some light on areas that we can be more aware of. The National Center for Victims of Crimes research shows that 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 20 boys is a victim of child sexual abuse. The research shows that children with disabilities or special needs are far more likely to be assaulted or abused than their peers without disabilities. I bring this topic up because it is important. It's important for us to acknowledge the reality and to arm ourselves as parents and caregivers with the words and the emotions and the compassion to best support our children in every way possible. Eli gives lots of phrases, examples, and solutions. She has lots of support on her website you can use immediately. And finally, please know that you and your child are not alone on this journey. The National Sexual Assault Hotline provides confidential 24-hour-a-day support. You can chat online with them at online.rainn.org. Or you can call them 24 hours a day at 800-656-4673. I know this is a tough topic, but I thank you so much for listening and being an active participant in your child's life. I hope you enjoy our conversation, and as always, let me know what you think. I am back with Eli Harwood, the attachment nerd. I am so excited that you're here to talk with us about some pretty important information. We are going to talk about sexual trauma and the abuse and how to handle it because it's an important topic. And Eli, I know you spend a lot of time on your social media talking about it and addressing it. And the reason this conversation popped up is because when I took Teal to the Alps to ski, she had a male instructor. And I didn't think twice about it. I just was like, okay, have a great time. Didn't think twice. And that's one, not good. It was a real red flag for me. Like, okay, you got to start getting more on top of this. The second thing is, they were outside with a bunch of people. So again, that really didn't bother me that much. However, when I came to pick her up, she was inside a small cabin with him because they'd gotten done a little early and she was a little cold. And so they wanted to go inside. And that's when I thought about it when they walked out. And I was like, oh, crap. And he's the nicest guy, right? Like there's no reason to think anything negative. And yet it hit me like a ton of bricks. And so the first thing that I would love to ask you is what could I have done like right there? Like when because I took her home and got her out of her ski clothes and just made sure that there weren't any marks or any, bleeding anywhere or bruises or anything like that. I mean, I did check right away just to be careful, but let's go. Let's dive in.
Let's start with talking about the things you can do to prevent it.
Perfect.
And what you do when you suspect it. So in that scenario, I don't know if there's anything else you could have done other than checking, because she's not verbal, correct?
Correct. Teal is non-verbal. Well, verbal-ish. We like to call her verbal-ish.
Verbal-ish.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you guys some thoughts on what you can do for a child who is not verbal versus a child who is verbal, how you can create a mode of communication around these things.
Wonderful.
But what we're going to think about in prevention is making this topic something children can communicate about, right? Mr. Rogers says what is mentionable is manageable. And for those of you who have nonverbal children, you know that they mention things just nonverbally, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to, how do we help empower them to mention these things? How do we help them feel a sense of ownership over certain parts of their body? Now, this is complicated, of course, especially if you have a child who has severe physical disabilities, because they have very little body ownership. You may be wiping their behind, right, for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And so you're allocating the body ownership in specific to affection and play. So as young as you can, you give your children autonomy or decision-making around how they want to play, what they want to play, and how and when they want to give or receive affection. You could do this with an infant. So I did this with my babies. So I want you to hear that. Like when my children were in infancy, I was reading their cues. And I'm a very affectionate person. I like to give and receive hugs and touch. You know, like God bless my friends who aren't huggers, because I'm a hugger.
I'm like, bring it in. I'm like, bring it in. COVID was so hard for me.
Oh, yes, me too. Me too, because that's one of the ways I really relate.
Mm-hmm, me too.
But when my children were born, I thought I really, really want them to learn that they have ownership over affection. So, you know, if I'm holding them and they're pushing against me, you know, I would reposition them or put them down or find a way. Like I was attuning to what does their body want in terms of touch and physical proximity and affection. And then when they're old enough and they're verbal enough, I begin to say, do you want to kiss? Right. And again, this is all depends on your child's abilities. So if they are, you know, able to give you a nod, that works. And you just communicate over and over again. You get to decide if you want to kiss or a hug, or you want to sit next to me, or you want to lean your head on my shoulder, or you want me to play with your hair, whatever the form of affection is. You get to decide, and you can always say no. I have twin daughters that are 3.5 right now. And one of them very much 24/7 just wants to be glued to me. Like that's just her personality. And she wants kisses and hugs. And she does this thing where she bites my nose. It's like her favorite thing. She's like, I want to bite nose. It's just very funny. It's very odd. I love it.
Teal bites right here. She used to bite right on my, the top of my shoulder. Yeah. It's a love, like a little nip, like, I love you. I could eat you up. It's her way of saying I could eat you up. Yeah. Okay.
But my other daughter is very particular about when she wants to. So, you know, when we leave for school in the morning, one of my kids is like throwing her arms around me and asking me for 17 different forms of affection. And my other daughter, I would say 9 times out of 10 wants no affection upon leaving. So I say, do you want a hug or a kiss? And she'll go, no. But like this morning I asked her and she did. So I got to give her a kiss, and that was so fun and great. So we're teaching our children that it is normal for them to get to decide who is giving affection to them. Because in the old model of you show respect by hugging and kissing your elders, we normalized adults having access to affectionate experiences with children. And we made it harder for children to understand this is right, but this is wrong.
Yes.
We're just clarifying this for our kids as much as possible. And we're going to warn. This is one of my favorite tricks. And I've never heard anyone else talk about this. I hope more people start talking about it. But you're going to warn other people who have access and privacy to our children. And we're going to do it very skillfully, which is rather than saying like, you know, if you touch my child, I'm going to hunt you down and beat you up. We're going to teach people who have access and privacy to our children, our other caregivers, about the ways we're empowering our children to stand up for sexual abuse. So if you are teaching your child verbally, let's say you have a child who is verbal, you're going to give them words. Make sure they know the anatomically correct names for all their body parts. This is a vulva. This is a penis. This is an anus. These are nipples. These are breasts. We actually, in my house, the one I do fail on is boobs. We say boobs still sometimes. At least it would hold up in court because it is a shared name for that body part. But anyway, So you're talking about their bodies and you're making it comfortable to talk about it. So like if we are uncomfortable talking about the body parts where sexual abuse happens, then how the hell are kids supposed to tell us about sexual abuse? They can't.
Completely. I've been talking about her vagina and her everything since she was a baby. When we're in the bathtub, we talk about it. We point at things. We ask questions. She looks at dad. She points at things when he's naked. Like we talk about it. It's
right.
Yeah.
Nudity. And here's the thing for you to remember, nudity and body parts and sexuality are not the same thing. Sexuality is arousal in those body parts. Nudity is non-arousal. Like, my vulva gets a lot more use urinating than it does sexually. It's far less a sexual body part than a sexual body part. It's very important.
Yeah. There you go.
I know it's my urethra that's urinating.
I know. I'm like, okay, do we need to talk about body parts, Eli? I'm kidding. I'm like, no, I'm kidding.
Vulva is the whole genitalia.
It's all of it. Yes.
Vagina is just that entrance into the right below the cervix.
Exactly.
Right?
And actually we talk about the vagina because I want her to know, like, things don't go in the vagina unless you
Absolutely.
Sorry, yes. But it's true.
Really is. I mean, the whole thing.
Yes.
The more comfortable we are talking about body parts, the more comfortable our children are going to be talking about their body parts. It doesn't make them more likely to touch other kids' body parts or do anything else. It just makes them understand these parts of their body.
And when Teal touches herself, it's no problem. Like, and I know that's pretty normal now, but man, when we were being raised, no. Mm-mm. But now I'll just say, oh, you're touching your, so I'll tell her.
It was more of a focus on shaming kids for touching their own body than on preparing kids to prevent other people from touching their bodies. Yes. And so what we're doing is we're flipping that. We're like, touch your body. I mean, and so we say, wash your hands before you touch your body, right? Because of, especially for girls, like wash your hands before you touch your body. But you can touch your body whenever you want, but it's also something you do in private. So these are parts that we keep protected because they can get hurt really easily. And so we protect them. But
Perfect.
That feels good. Do that whenever you want. So you're empowering kids with the language if they are linguistically able. And then if they aren't, come up with sign language. Help them come up with sign language that describes those parts or symbols that they can use. If the dog tries to go up and bumps them in the genitalia, you talk to that dog very loudly in front of your child, like you do not touch their penis or their bottom, or their bottom's not an anatomically correct word, but we do still say bottom.
Yeah, it's fine.
Behind, their gluteus maximus, the rear. Anyway, you don't have access to that. That's their private part. That part belongs to them.
That's a great example, though. That's a wonderful and very applicable example that we can all just start paying more attention to. And then you reprimand the dog. And so, yes, love that.
But don't hurt the dog.
No,
just
no.
Hurt the dog. No doggy. No.
Yes.
Right. So you're setting the stage here. We are trying to make it so that our children, if they are encountering someone, they have a discomfort with what is happening, not a comfort with what is happening. We want them to be instinctively fearful. I want my child to be afraid in the context of somebody who is trying to engage them sexually. So now the three contexts of sexual abuse: the internet, right? Online, other grownups, and peers. And these three things have very different needs for understanding and protection and how they operate and how they harm. So we want to put safety protocols around all three of them, and we want to create conversations around all three of them. By the way, for those of you listening, I have an entire free sexual abuse prevention webinar where I go through this in more detail. So you can just go to attachmentnerd.com when we're done, and you can watch the whole webinar, and you can just go and keep watching it over and over and over again throughout time. I go through different stages. So if you have like a 2-year-old and you're like, this is all I need to watch right now, you can skip some of the stuff about how we help older kids. Vice versa. If your kids are older and you're like, but actually, if your kids are older, go back and rewatch the earlier ones. So these are our three domains. So we're protecting children from other adults by warning the other adults. So we would say something. So I'll tell you what I do personally, and then you're going to have to translate it based on your kids' ability and capacity and where they're at. But so anyone who watches my children when I am not there, I tell them, hey, by the way, we are really big on sexual abuse prevention. I just wanted you to know this because it's kind of not normal and a lot of people don't know this, but my children speak of their body parts in anatomically correct names. And the reason that we do that is because it helps them be able to communicate if something were to happen. And it helps them to testify in a court setting, and that person would be charged as a result of them being able to accurately describe what happened. So if I am talking to somebody who is not a pedophile, they're on board.
Yeah.
That sounds great. Glad to know it. And if this person happens to be someone who has intentions to sexually abuse children, they've been warned. They are far less likely to mess with my child because they aren't interested in getting caught. Right?
So to put that into perspective for my teal or a nonverbal child, you would simply say things like, we use pictures and we describe things, and we actually do talk about all of these parts, and she knows where these parts are on her body. And so, like, if I were to say to her, where is your, breast? She knows where her breast, I mean, she doesn't have breasts, but you know what I mean? Her nipples. And I think that would be another way that you could do it, is you don't have to say she uses these words. Go ahead.
Okay. So here's what someone in your community who is creative and bright needs to do. Create a flip book, like shows, like I felt unsafe with someone. I felt creepy. Someone tried to touch my body parts. Someone tried to show me their body parts, like in a kid version of it. Because this would be kind of complex to do. So it doesn't feel like you're looking at inappropriate images, but it also feels like you're like a kid could communicate exactly what happened.
I'm going to check on that. I bet there is one. I bet there is one because, these kids use icons all the time. I mean, there's icons for going to the bathroom. There's icons for poop in the potty and then you wipe. And I mean, there's icons for all of that.
I hope there is one. If there isn't one, we need to find someone to do it, because that, I think, giving them the way to communicate, and then you can say to the caregiver, we have a whole flip book, and they have memorized, and they know.
Yeah,
that,
I know.
That this shouldn't happen. This shouldn't happen. No, you're laughing because I'm like, you're like me, where I'm like, no, motherfucker, excuse my friend. You do not get to touch my child.
No.
In order to feel powerful for yourself.
Correct. And I even say things. Yeah. And even like I know we've talked about this in the past, or you've talked about it in the past, but like giving hugs, like Auntie doesn't have to get a hug, like to, feel good about herself. And you don't have to give that hug. And just this morning we had a friend leaving the house, and he's like Teal's uncle. And he said, okay, Teal, I'm leaving. Can I have a hug? And she was like, nope. And she gave him the no sign. And he was like, all right. Well, I had one last night. I really appreciated that. Your hugs are really great. And so I hope you have a really good day. And I said, Teal, I am so glad that you use your voice and that our friend here, I'm not going to use his name, but our friend respected your wishes.
Absolutely.
And she was like, yeah. And then I don't know if it was good or bad, but then she was like, she gave me a hug. And I was like,
that's great. Well, she felt connected to you. She wanted to express affection to you because she felt you were behind her, invalidating her desire not to do that.
Yeah. Okay.
That's amazing.
Well, so I just really, so it's simple as something like that can help, help a child understand that they have the right to choose, which is exactly what you talked about in the beginning. Okay. So you talk about the internet, grown-ups, and peers. Okay.
So we're protecting children from grown-ups by creating a warning system, and we're signaling to possible pedophiles that we are paying attention. We are empowering our children, and they are paying attention, so that hopefully they will feel afraid of engaging our children in that way. Now, the internet, it's a whole other thing. So the two things I worry about the most on the internet are sexual extortion and early exposure to pornography.
Right.
Okay. And those have different woundings, right? So with sexual extortion, what happens is that grownups usually, but sometimes older kids as well, are a part of these networks, pretend to be someone they aren't. They build a bond, they build a relationship, they make your child feel special, whether that's through a chat room or through a game, or, they're playing World of Warcraft, or they're on Facebook or TikTok or whatever, but they build a relationship. And then slowly over time, they either coerce them into giving nude pictures or doing things, or they threaten them into it. I have had this happen to a couple of my clients when they were actually young adults. So, it happens when you're young, it happens when you're old. Like, they thought they were having a relationship, a new online relationship. Someone asked them to send a picture of themselves. They did. And then what happens is that person then uses that and says, I will send this all over the internet. I will show people what you did. And they're playing on sexual shame.
Yeah.
Like, as if you've done something wrong by doing that. And then if you're young and you're a child and you don't know. So I have a really dear friend who used to be a nanny of mine who went through this as let's say she was 10 or 11 years old. But this person who sexually extorted her until she was like 20 years old, he would go and find her Facebook and like friend her friends and then let her know that he had friended her friends. And if she didn't send more pictures or more images of X, Y, or Z, and would send the address of her parents so that she was convinced that this person would come and kill her family if she didn't do, or if she told. And
so how do we handle that?
So I'm very strict. My kids are not allowed to have contact with anybody else on the internet that I don't know. So if I can't verify who it is, then they can't have contact with them on the internet. We keep computers in public spaces. My children don't have their own individual tablets. So they actually do have their own individual tablets that we only use for airplanes and long car rides. There are downloaded games and downloaded things. So they're not playing live. They're not on social media. My plan, I say my plan only because I know how parenting works. You make plans, change. But my plan is that no one will have independent social media until they're 16. So I'm going to say until you can operate heavy machinery, we're not going to ask you to operate heavy social machinery. It's just too heavy to operate yet. You're not quite ready. Your brain's not quite developed.
We'll bring you back in 9 years.
Sounds great. We'll find out if it's happening.
See how that goes. I love that though.
Here's what's hard is once they hit junior high school, they all start communicating in those platforms. So Wait Till 8th is an amazing program. Have you heard of it?
No.
Go online, Google Wait Till 8th. I think it's just waittill8th.com. I can't remember exactly. And I think it's the number, not the spelled out 8th.
Okay.
But it's a petition to sign. And then you can bring it to your school principal and try and create a gathering and get as many people in your community to sign it as possible. And the idea is that no kids get smartphones till 8th grade. So we're trying to prevent kind of she has one, so I should have one, the normalizing of everybody getting smartphones. So helping to, address your community. Like, hey, we all want to prevent this ourselves. So how can we do that? Using parental controls, honestly, staying present when kids are on the internet.
Yeah.
I think I get it. We're exhausted. And it's like, oh, this is my chance to like empty the dishwasher, put out the trash without someone saying, mom, 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 mom. But like really, like you wouldn't leave your child unattended with a fire. So like, don't leave your child unattended on the internet. Like sit next to them, watch what's happening. Are there in-game app requests for different things? Have they downloaded something else? Is there an ad for pornography coming in? I mean, be really weary of free game apps. Honestly, they're funded through that.
It's also something to say, teach me how to play, right? So you don't have to be hovering. You don't have to be like, oh, I'm just going to hover over you and see what you're doing. Nobody likes that. So teach me how to play this game. Teach me about it. Help me understand what you're doing. What's the goal here? What does this mean? What does that mean? I mean, get involved.
And also just sit simultaneously. You want to play on your tablet? That sounds great. Let's go sit on the couch. I'm going to sit next to you and do my work, and you can just be silently eyeballing while you're doing whatever you're doing. As young as you can, create an ethos of this is a fun thing that you get to use, but it's also something that can create harm. So we're going to be thoughtful about it. And I'm going to make sure that you're safe. You're using it safely, just like I would if we're sitting at the fireplace. Okay. I'm going to watch and manage how you're engaging around those flames. I'm going to make sure that you're putting your marshmallow in the fire, not your hand.
Yes.
Right.
All right. Peer to peer.
Okay. So couple of things, and we're going to differentiate. This is going to answer the second question also. But peers are another place where kids can get exposed and sexually abused or sexually exposed or explore each other's bodies. And that those are three different things. Okay. So the reason that a peer can abuse another peer, and I say peers, really what I mean is another child, is that there are older children. So children can be 15 years old and they're still children in the eyes of the law, but they are more sexually evolved. They understand what they're doing and they're targeting a younger child. So you do need to be thoughtful about babysitters, about other kids in the neighborhood, about, if your children are at other people's houses, like are there older siblings in that house that would have access to them, that you're telling kids that other kids might try to do these things also. And so what we have there is body safety rules. And there's a free printout that's a part of my sexual abuse guide. So you can actually just print it out, keep it in your house, go over the body safety rules with your kids. And we've included other things in this template to help kids kind of digest, like no hitting, no kicking, no punching, right? Those are body safety rules. And so are no touching any of our parts under our bathing suits. Even though we're talking about our parts, our anatomical parts with their names, and we're making it comfortable, not all the kids that come to our house are going to have that comfortability. And so rather than trying to teach, Johnny from down the lane what a vulva is, you can instead say all the parts under the body, under all of the parts under the swimming suit.
Yeah,
Those
that's a great example. Mm-hmm.
Private that we don't look at, we don't show, we don't look at pictures of them, we don't show pictures of them or videos of them.
Mm-hmm.
So you establish with your child body safety rules so that
Mm-hmm.
they have an understanding of what is or is not okay in terms of peer relationships. But children who are sexually abused and don't understand what happened and don't have a way to talk about it and don't know all those things act out that abuse with their peers because they're trying to understand what happened, right? So I'm not a play therapist, but I know a lot of play therapists. And what happens in play therapy is that kids find ways to symbolize their experiences through play. And that helps them process the things they've gone through in their life, which helps them begin to understand what happened. Well, if a child has been sexually abused and isn't in play therapy and doesn't have places to talk about it, they play it out with other children. So they may be in the back room and they're playing with the dolls, and the child who's been sexually abused will say, why don't you put your hot dog in my mouth?
Mm-hmm.
And now all of a sudden your child is putting their penis in the other child's mouth, and there's no real understanding of it. And that's the reason I hesitate to call it abuse, is because I think there's no intentionality in that at all.
No. Mm-mm.
There's no understanding of it. And there's not necessarily a power dynamic that's playing it out, but it is sexual in nature in terms of how does a child know to put a penis in a mouth? They've been exposed. They've either been exposed to porn or they've been directly sexually abused.
Right. I mean, Teal knows how to put on blush and lipstick because she's seen me put on makeup. And so it's just the same exact example. There's nothing inherently wrong. I mean, obviously I don't want my 6-year-old wearing lots of makeup, but she thinks it's fun. It's play. She's seen it happen. She thinks it's exactly the same thing. It's not her.
She doesn't get it. There's no getting it. There's no, yeah. Mm-mm. So, but it is I call that sexual trauma still, because in the long run, so whether or not it's traumatic in the moment, which I will tell you, for some kids it is, for some kids it isn't. For some kids it's like, haha, this is funny. Other feels deeply disturbing and confusing. It is traumatic in the long run, because as that sexual development starts to happen for that child, they have these memories and experiences that feel very confusing and they didn't understand at the time. And now they're starting to understand them, and they start to feel weird and uncomfortable about it. And again, without words or language to talk about it, it feels really disorganizing to their kind of worldview. So we're wanting our kids to know, hey, this could happen with a grown-up. Here's what you do. This could happen with a kid. Here's what you do. And I always tell my kids, if another kid does something to you and you let me know, nobody's going to get in trouble. Nobody's getting in trouble, but we're going to help you all understand how to place more safely and make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
Now, if they're older and they're more verbal and they're able to say, like, I don't want to see that kid again, and they do feel it's trauma. I mean, of course you're not going to make them learn to play with that kid again. That's, that's fine. That relationship can be done.
Well, and you can tell that with a nonverbal child. And I know who Teal wants to play with and who Teal doesn't want to play with, period. It's very easy. It's very easy for me to say, you don't want to have a play date. She's asking you for a play date, but you don't want me to say yes to that play date. I know that. And that's about, you talk about being in tune with your infant. All of us parents that have nonverbal or verbalist children, we are highly sensitive to, or at least most of us are highly sensitive to what nonverbal cues we're seeing from our child. And I think what you're simply saying is it's a more refined way of following your intuition, but then following it up with words and actions.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I love it.
Oh, well, good. So how do you encourage kids to talk about it? So let's say we have an autistic child who repeats phrases over and over and over, right? Because that's a very typical tendency. Walk me through that situation. Let's say he or she is abused or traumatized at the playground or something, behind the back toilets, or, again, don't send your kids in to do toilet on their own. I just don't ever agree with that. But talk to me about that. Like, so a child that maybe is hugely intelligent, but has a hard time getting the words out, but can get the words out. Can you kind of walk me through, like, how do you encourage them to talk about it or to tell you about it?
Well, first of all, you ask with some frequency. My son's 8 now. When he was 5, I probably asked him like every other week, hey, has anyone tried to touch your private parts or showed you their private parts or done any of that? He's like, nope. And again, you're making it manageable and normal. And I'm not like, has anyone tried to touch my parts? Because that's so overwhelming to their nervous system, right? It's like,
What you guys didn't see is Eli like leaned in and looked down and got big. And no, it's just more of a conversation. It's like, hey, I like that. I think that's wonderful. Just make it a part of the conversation.
And I'm also asking, like, how are your friends treating you? How's your teachers been? You're showcasing to them, these are conversations that we can have and that I feel comfortable having. And I am not anxious about, even though of course I don't want them to happen, but I'm able to regulate my body. If you need to tell me these things, we're going to be able to handle it. In other words, I'm going to be able to handle it and you can tell me it. So I think just bringing it up. And there's a lot of reasons why kids don't disclose. Sometimes they don't disclose because they've been threatened or there's a special relationship there that they don't want to lose that person. They kind of are aware that might change. They might be worried about burdening you. Maybe you're in a stressful period of time and in your life, and they're afraid that it's going to add to your plate. They don't know how to talk about it still.
Oftentimes the abuser is threatening to threaten their parents, like to injure parents, things like that.
I have a sibling who was sexually abused by an in-law in my family system. And so didn't tell us for like 11 years because they were so afraid it would break up the family.
Yeah.
And ultimately they were right. It did break up the family, but I think not in the way they expected. Like we broke off from him and we broke off from those who chose to support him. But, he claims he never did it, of course.
Of course.
Right. So he was just misinterpreting him.
How does it manifest? So let's say you have a 15-year-old that is now starting to show changes in behavior. Like all of a sudden you're like, where is this coming from as a parent? What do you look for?
You're looking for like a consistently disassociated state. Like they're just checked out in a way they didn't used to be checked out. There's like a marked shift in their personality, sensitivity to topics. They start getting weird about the bathroom in particular, right? Like, oh, that's affiliated with these parts of the body. They don't want you in there. Here's what's hard. This is why I said the thing in the beginning. You don't know for certainty that you can prevent this. And you also don't know with certainty that you're going to be able to figure out that it happened.
Right.
So,
and 15-year-olds get wonky anyway.
Well, that's
to be honest. It's like
normal developmental changes.
Right. So I think that's why what you're telling me now is start talking about it when they're 6, start talking about it when they're 2, start talking about it and make it no big deal. It's just, we talk about it. We talk about body parts. We talk about safety. We talk about ownership. We talk about respect.
We talk about emotional abuse in relationships. We talk about all of the topics. We talk about it in a way that we're grounded and we're not like over explaining and going into all the, details of everything.
Right.
But we're giving our kids the deep sense that we can handle the weird, awkward, scary conversations. Right. You can tell us. And we're watching them interact. Right. So let's say you have a 15-year-old who's still nonverbal. Mm-hmm. And you're talking about your great attunement skills. You're watching them. They do not want to go to school all of a sudden.
Right. Something happened. Yeah.
Go to school with them one day. Spend the whole day at school, just sitting in the corner watching. Do they get real amped up around one particular para? Okay. What's that about? And again, you may not be able to solve the puzzle. You may not be able to go, this is what happened. This is what they did. This was whatever, but you can go, you know what? This relationship is not working. I'm going to have to go in and advocate with the school that we need to switch paras. This is not right for my kid. And maybe you will have prevented sexual abuse. Maybe you will have stopped sexual abuse from continuing to occur, and you may not ever know.
Right.
But
I know
that you watched your child have a very distinct reaction to a certain person. And that's all you needed to know.
So we do know that children with differences, however you want to describe it, it's such a tricky word anymore. Special needs, disabilities, neurodivergent. It's so tricky. Anyways, we know that those children are sexually traumatized or abused more than a child that is what we would call typical.
Yes. But why? Okay, so sexual abuse. Why do people sexually abuse? What is it about? Well, from we talked about kids. So a child who's been sexually abused and is now engaging in those behaviors with another child is attempting to understand what happened to them, right? So they are trying to process this thing. But grown-ups, so someone with a grown-up brain who is pedophiliac who is attracted to children, who is specifically intentionally targeting children. Why do they do that? Well, here are the things we know. We know that 99% of them, or 98, oh shoot, I hate when people mess up statistics. It's either 98 or 99%.
Perfect.
Were sexually abused themselves.
Oh.
So it's a disease. It's a disease that spreads. We also know that people that are pedophiliac tend to target many, 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 many children. So most people who experience sexual abuse do not sexually abuse other people later on in adulthood. The mass majority. And that's a statistic I should learn too, but it's very low. I think it's something like 3%. So just because you were sexually abused does not mean you're going to go on and sexually abuse. But if you are someone who is a pedophile, it is very likely you were sexually abused. And so, I mean, I'm not saying like, oh my gosh, we need to have so much compassion for these grownups who are doing this thing, because, you know, they don't need compassion. They need accountability and they need help. But why are they that way? Well, they're that way because that's what they learned very early on. And they have come to find arousal through power.
Through power. Yeah.
So it's actually less about sex. It's not really about sex. It's about power. And they're targeting those who they cannot feel humiliated by, those who cannot stand up and defend themselves and make them feel rejected, unwanted. And so kids who can't verbalize are perfect targets.
Correct.
I get to feel entirely powerful, and I get to do this thing to you that you don't understand, but I do, which is a flipping of their trauma, right? So now I'm the one who understands and you're not. And so that feels like a relief of the trauma, even though it's obviously not. It's a continuation of the trauma. But yeah, so I also like, I'm more sus. My 8-year-old son and his friends now call everything sus. You know, if like you put something in front of, this is it's a trend. It means suspect. But so like that's
Thank
totally
you.
sus.
That's sus.
Okay. That's totally sus.
Okay.
But I feel much more sus about highly charming, influential people than I do about people that are kind of awkward and weird and don't have a lot of social clout. The stereotype around who's abusing is wrong. It is not the person who you get the heebie-jeebies from. Like that person struggles socially and it's obvious.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, of course, are there some people like that who abuse
Yes.
them? But like they're the exception. For the most part, it's like, you know, I'm worried about the person that wants to be liked by that kind of like works the room. And I am a room worker in some ways, but my goal is never to be dominant over other people. My goal is to be connected. And so you're looking at like, does this person relate through dominance and control? And are they controlling their image or are they connecting? And I'm really wary of people that are like into their own sense of power and influence in the world.
That's actually some really good feedback for all of us, whether or not we have children with special needs or not. Yeah, I mean, I know that I can walk into a room. By the way, I'm a room worker as well, and I'm fine with that. But because I like connecting with people, exactly like what you said. But man, there are people when you can walk into a room and you're all like your spine just goes a little wonky, or you get a shiver, or you're like, something is off. Yeah, those are not usually the people that are socially challenged.
Yeah, I mean, for me, a red flag is always if I feel really charmed. So if someone is successful at charming me and makes me feel special and makes me feel good, I'm not going to like sit there and like try and like, you know, put on my Inspector Gadget goggles and follow them around to figure out if they're a sexual abuser or not. But I am that is from my experience in 17 years of working with sexual abuse survivors. It's the mayor. It's the youth pastor. It's the person who, you know, everybody loves in the neighborhood, who's always so willing to watch the kids and help out. It's the next door neighbor who's so generous and always wants to help. Like, it's not the person who has obvious mental health issues.
It's really good to know.
And I don't want all you parents to have to like walk around the world being paranoid, right? So that's why I'm saying like set up these things, right? You warn these people so that you can go, okay, well, I did what I could. I warned. You know, I know a lot of people who are like, I wouldn't ever let a man take care of my child. I won't let them babysit. I won't whatever, because statistically speaking, it is far more men. That's one way to do it. I don't do that. Actually, the 2 primary daycare providers that work with my girls are men, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But I also feel some confidence in myself, given that I've really thought about this a lot over the years and spent time in the research and spent time clinically. So like, I don't necessarily feel like, oh, well, this is what you should do. I really think like, listen to your gut, watch their reaction. Like if you bring up sexual abuse and someone's like, why are you bringing that up? I mean, maybe they're not a predator, but maybe they're not going to be able to expel a predator or notice a predator or handle it if kids are touching each other or.
Well, so let's go there for our final question, just to look at what is the difference between exploration and curiosity versus abuse or trauma?
So exploration is not sexual. Just like I talk about like my body parts, like I said, my urethra pees far more than the rest of my vulva operates sexually in terms of frequency. Sorry, husband, but that's the truth.
If I was having as much sex as I was peeing, there would be a big problem, I think.
Well, yeah, that's way too much sex. But anyway, it's that these parts of our body are part of our body. And they are the most covered parts for many reasons. And so there's a mystique around them. And so as kids develop, they become curious. And so like there's a mutual curiosity that it can occur between two similarly aged children where one is like, and it can be humor too. Like there's a butt stage where it's like butts are the funniest thing in the whole world. And someone's going to want to show someone else their butt. And maybe the other kid, maybe they're also lacking social skills and they're working, just developmentally speaking, what their age is or whatever. And they're like, they pull down the front of their pants because they're like, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's this kind of innocence to it though. So like if your child comes to you and they say, Dana touched me in my private parts, your brain is going to go, what? Right. But you got to calm it down, bring it down.
Siren. Yes.
Get a deep breath. Okay. I'm so glad you told me what happened. Tell me what they did. There's a big difference between Dana, like rubbing on their private part and, understanding that there's like a friction and that friction can create pleasure versus Dana, like poked me with her fingernail and it scratched me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You're right. She shouldn't have touched that private part, but like, now what? Okay. So
yeah, now what?
Now what? We're going to like all talk together about body safety rules again. And we're going to go over body safety rules.
And with Dana and with Dana's parents.
Absolutely. We're going to call Dana's parents and tell them 100%. If Dana was rubbing and rubbed on me for a long time and told me that after they rubbed me, that I was going to make a cry sound.
Oh boy.
That's grown-up material. How does Dana know that? Right. And that's what I was saying about like a kid putting a hot dog in their mouth. How does a kid know to put mouth to genital? Mm-hmm. That is extremely adult.
Correct.
Right. So we're looking at the content of the interaction and we're doing that to figure out, is one of these children being sexually abused by an adult somewhere or being exposed to pornography or being sexually abused by another child? Is there a cousin in this child's life who's doing this to them? And then where's the grown up? There's a grown up somewhere in this mix. And how do we, protect all the children involved in this link of abuse, right? But I don't want to be non-shaming.
Well, yeah.
Oh yeah. How did that feel when that happened?
Well, and I think, you talk about this quite a bit, that our ability to control our nervous system, our fight and flight, our panic, our heightened awareness. I mean, even as you were talking about that, I felt inside just, man, if somebody did that to my kid, like, oh my God, I just felt it rumbling in there. And it is so important, just to finalize this conversation about, one, it's okay to talk about it. Thank God they're telling you, because then you have the ability to address it.
And I want to leave you on a reassuring message with this, actually. So I have had in my career hundreds of childhood sexual abuse survivors processing their traumas. And I've had a very small handful, unfortunately, who were able to tell their caregivers and were believed. And the impact of the trauma in those two groups is night and day. So I want you to hear this. Like, childhood sexual abuse is damaging and hurtful and painful and traumatic, but it is far, far, far more damaging, painful, hurtful, and traumatic if you don't feel comfortable telling your parents, you aren't able to talk about it, or if you tell them and they don't believe you or they don't make it stop. So I say that because I think a lot of parents feel like this is the ultimate, absolute worst thing that could happen to my child outside of them dying. And if it happens, I'm essentially going to feel like they did die and we did die and we all died. And I'm like, no. This can be healed. This can be healed. And your first job is to stay calm enough for them to tell you as much as they need to tell you and remember as much as they need to remember, and to continue to process it with you over and over and over again until it feels resolved. And Two, to believe them, believe them, believe them. Now, children do occasionally make things up, recognize power plays. I think that happens more with kids who struggle with concrete thinking, where they're like, oh, I'm not supposed to do this. So I'm going to tell them that Jerry did this to me. And then Jerry's not going to be able to come over and play anymore. Yes, of course that happens. It happens extremely rarely. If your child does say they were sexually abused and you believe them and it turns out they weren't, and you're able to truly verify that, that's another lesson. Now we're talking about how important it is to tell the truth about this, and we explain what could happen. But it is far more likely that if your child tells you that it did happen than that it didn't. Right. So believe them, seek help, seek support. Don't do this on your own.
Right.
There are lots of professionals who specialize in this arena and can help you navigate the conversations and the healing, and also all of the logistics. Like, are we calling the police? Are we pressing charges? Are we continuing to remain friends with this family where this kid is? There's a lot to figure out afterwards. So don't do that alone. For now, head to attachmentnerd.com, sign up for that free sexual abuse prevention webinar. You can follow me on all my socials, Attachment Nerd, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. You can go sign up for my other parenting courses where we go over all the other things at Attachment Nerd. And yeah, we'll keep chatting about this.
Yeah, it's really, really good. I think we should have a live Zoom where people can come in and ask you questions. It would be, or not a Zoom, a live, whatever you call those. No,
whatever they are.
I don't know.
Webinar.
Yeah.
Sure.
Eli, thank you so very much. The information that you have shared is going to change the way we all as parents talk to our children. So thank you very, very much.
To be with you. Thank you for being such a great facilitator of these conversations and empowering parents.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You have a wonderful day, and we'll have you back soon. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you found one or two meaningful nuggets of information to make your day better. If you think there's value in what we do, please take a moment to tell another friend, family member, or a caregiver. We'd love to hear from you at forourspecialkids@gmail.com. You can send in a question, a comment, a topic that you'd like to learn more about, or if you'd like us to highlight a certain person, please send that information to us. It makes our show so much better and so much more valuable for you. Our Facebook and Instagram handle is For Our Special Kids. And finally, remember to witness the wonder and the wisdom within yourself and others. Until next time.